Artists are desperate, and artistic recognition is subjective and dependent on mere mortals, cronyism and popularity contest, holding court with naked emperors, court jesters, and art critics with magic wands. Other lifestyles with a more structured protocol can rely on that same system to fulfill basic human needs like stability and security. The hustle and grovel are part of the proprietary etiquette. There are more definitive rules with well-defined goals and scheduled payoffs. Money's one of them. They can afford to act more civilized. The sensitive artist is a myth. Like wounded animals, they're too desperate to be sensitive to anyone's needs but their own. Some of the most insensitive people I've ever met are artists. The insecure artist is not a myth. Many artists treat each opportunity like it might be their last meal, or in this case, dinner party. Here is where the unsavory behavior comes in. For example, I have seen artists shamelessly name-dropping and giving credit to famous people they hardly know to impress people they do not even respect, all the while forgetting their fabulous, not-so-famous artist friends who are only useful to inspire and perspire. They measure all that on a butcher scale, which makes them hacks, which makes them relevant. The wounded animal is the most dangerous in nature and on the street. They are consumed with survival, and for good reason. The death knell of the artist is not the lack of recognition by the fickle, prissy art world, but the desire to suckle that social parasite, a marriage made in hell with its offspring, derivative art that exists to numb the senses, not awaken them. I've seen so many dog and pony shows. Watch as they bow and bend over to suck up the applause. Bullseye and bullshit. Like I said, they're wounded and dangerous, so they panic and go into El Desperado reptilian gut mode, even if they're already rich and famous. Artistic fame and notoriety do not protect these children of the corny. Matthew McConaughey selling Lincoln with his Oscar as a hood ornament. Johnny Depp pimping John Sparrow Pirate at Large for Sauvage by Dior. What would his idol Hunter S. Thompson say? Good thing he's dead, not Hunter, Johnny. Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie for Chanel and Louis Vuitton. Jay-Z is worth $1 billion and still did a commercial for Samsung for $20 million more. Beyonce paid $50 million by Pepsi. Is it just me who is beholden to the outdated concept of selling out? Is it okay because the hip-hop world has popularized and thereby validated making as much money as you possibly can without any damage to your credibility? Or is it only acceptable if you started with humble beginnings? How much is enough? I got my first wind of it while I was working on a Run DMC video back in the day. I saw the signature gold, the name brands being proudly worn, and thought how things had changed from the Black Panthers feeding the hungry or Gil Scott-Heron rapping about winter in America. I updated my concept of a rebel to a wider playing field. Old school rebels were always on the edge. Outsiders, l'enfant terrible, Motley Crue's punks. We glorified that and took pride in that. Hip-hop showed me the nuts and bolts, the insides of being an outsider. No sad stories, no scarlet letters, front, center, and in your face. No shame in the game. Is it corny to have ethics and dignity in this day and age? Is this just an old-fashioned concept, more at home in the past than in the world of today? Will the real cornball please stand up or drop dead? Maybe there is a simple answer to the artistic conundrum. Like Hitchcock used to say, when an actor comes to me and wants to discuss his character, I say, it's in the script. If he says, but what's my motivation? I say, your salary. I am not just giving the New York weather report. The drag queen credo, you better work, is true. I know this is no surprise to those who chose to accept the once noble mission of the artist, the pauper, the poet, the pawn and the king, started a band to express themselves. Tighten up or shut up, all ye who enter here. It's a jackass in the box lifestyle, big surprise, who said adrenaline isn't a drug, a carnival dunk in an amusement park for cowards. Observations on the ass-kissing artists, pathetic and playing the game they are selling. And if you want ethics, that's extra. These days, ethics are about as modern and pertinent as doilies or gingerbread. They're hokey sentiments written in cursive. They are irrelevant and get in the way. Prostitutes know this when they tell their Johns, no kissing. There are plenty of desperados in carnival booths ready to sell. Step right up. You've already paid the price of admission, your mind. They then pay the bill for your experience, mistakes, bad decisions, hubris, psychological problems, arrogance, and courage. Your brain picked and vanity stoked and stroked by vampires who bite, who suck your lifeblood. This works to prop up and animate their limp carcass with all you've given up, so they can cash in on the treasure trove of cool that nearly killed you on the highway to hell. That pedal to the metal joyride where the mean truly justifies the dead end. The skull and crossbones of ill repute, marking the spot to cross the punchline. But is a joke on you, where the Joker went wild and he couldn't smile? Speaking of vampires who suck, who can forget that poster child of pop art Andy Warlock? He made an asshole of everyone, including himself. I'll be your mirror. Valerie Solanas and Edie Sedgwick, to mention a few, both excluded by their cockeyed set of ethics and their inability to process being made a joke of, so they became the antithesis of the creative hopes and dreams they started out with. A litmus test, a glue trap, a cluttered curlicue of uncool. But wait, it's the same old vampire and the same old story. A vampire never dies. He will remain eternally famous, alive and well, endlessly cashing in. His actual death, a mere technicality. He was always a ghost. The factory, with all its fake and circumstance, was a place where you could come in a muse and go out a sucker or a corpse. Didn't anyone ever tell you to never watch how the sausage is made? People were disposable, just like his expensive art. Just crank out another one. So much canvas to work with, damaged, hopeful losers, ready to do anything to be somebody. He did give us the Velvet Underground. They were a sweet, creepy crawl along an uneven landscape. There was a Sunday morning. There had to be. Being nice is efficient and gets in all the small places between people. The devil's in the details, and he always shows up, whether he's invited or not, and is always the last one to leave the guilty party.
This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl. Special guest today is Vicky Galves. I like to call her the mouth from the north, south, east, and west. The book she's been writing for about 20 years, but might be published soon, as it should, because she's one of the top pop satirists I've ever met. Rebel without applause. Victoria and I go way back, I guess, to about 79, but we're going to start with your history even before that. Like, I want to get a little bit into kind of your initial runaway incident into pop culture through Ken Kesey.
Yeah, well, I met Ken Kesey when I was running away, and I had
a little affair?
A little affair, yeah. But
tell people who Ken Kesey is, for those who
Ken Kesey wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Which, by the way, he hated the movie of, I hear.
He hated the movie by Michael Douglas, but he was also the subject of Thomas Wolfe's book, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, which was, by the New York Times, said it epitomized an era, so that's no.
What era was it? What era? What
65 year? To 75.
When did you meet Kesey?
1973.
From hitchhiking from Colorado up to Oregon?
I met him hitchhiking because I didn't like the people I was with and I needed to do something else, and I met him and
wait a minute. I know a little bit more about this than you're saying, because you met him because while you were hitchhiking, an older woman picks you up. She gets a flat tire or runs out of gas. You say you'll go for gas, and when you come back, she says, because you're looking for Ken Kesey, basically, or you're on a trek, and she happens to know his parents.
Yeah, she knew Chuck and Daisy Kesey, and I didn't like the people I was with. They were not very nice to me. I thought, what was the best thing to do while I was waiting to go to this hippie wedding? of my friends.
Where was this?
In Eugene, Oregon. And so I said, oh, yeah, I liked Ken's stuff. And so I said, doesn't Ken Kesey live around here? And she said, yeah. I helped her. I hitchhiked and I brought a tow truck back to where we got the flat tire. And she said she knew their parents. And then I called up.
Actually, cold call, and this is in the day of
I
landlines.
called Ken while we were waiting for the flat tire to be fixed. His wife answered, and she said, hi, who is this? And I said, I was really nervous. I was only 17. I was like, I'm a reporter. And then I hear like this fee, fi, fo, fum, Ken coming back. And he goes, something told me I should take this call.
Nice.
And I said, yeah, well, I'm with some horrible people. And he said, well, come over the next day. So I came over, and he was very unhappy with the way he thought that One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was really a watered-down version.
The film, that is.
Of what he wanted. Even though most people do like that movie.
It was an art form, so.
Yeah. The most he could do was get it reduced to based on a film based on a story by Ken Kesey.
Okay.
And so, we became friends over the years, and that's the end of the...
Well, that's all she's going to... That's all she's...
No.
That's all she's going to tell right now.
We had a big relationship. Yeah.
So it sounded fun. It was worth it, I guess. You cold calling Ken.
Yeah, it was worth it.
And back in the day, a lot of people came together in very disparate ways. I mean, often you could just literally run into someone on the street, cold call somebody whose number you got from their mother, hitchhike and be picked up. This was the time. I mean, you're talking about, I'm going to say from like the late 60s to probably the mid 70s. Yeah, to the mid 70s. I mean, it was very possible for, I don't want to say hookups, but to hook up with some interesting characters.
Well, that's the thing.
By these
you're not.
methods.
It's not Tinder where you're like next, basing on the surface. That collision where someone comes to you, you kind of look beyond that surface and see what's there.
He said something told me I should take this.
And he had you there is what you're saying.
Yeah,
okay.
and so I
What
went
did
out.
you learn from hanging out with him? What basically, you're 17 years old, you're rather naive.
I learned that he was very, like, in the 60s vernacular, transcendental. I lost contact with him after a while.
But what did you learn about yourself?
What I learned about myself was he didn't have to explain everything. After a while, like, I had to dump him because he was thinking that, he was still all those guys, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, Allen Ginsberg, all those guys were really sexist. And I didn't really like that, you know? And they were like thinking like David Bowie, like Ziggy Stardust was out there. Like it was 1973. It was after all the 60s stuff.
Okay, so what's the thread with David Bowie here? You're saying
that
was an alternative to the misogynist?
I was living with Ken, and I had an apartment. I didn't even know. I was like, oh, wow. This is so, you're so, he was like, yeah, I'll get an apartment in San Francisco and you can stay there. And I was like, that is so nice.
This is before the Me Too movement because she was 17. And also in those days, actually, a lot of what happened was consensual. It didn't matter the age.
Yeah.
But eventually you dumped him, is basically what you're saying.
I dumped him until
there was only a 40-year age difference.
Well, yeah, kind of. But
and again, now you're getting into glam.
Like about a 20.
All right.
Yeah, well,
doesn't matter.
But you're getting into glam.
So, yeah, and I was. Then I saw him like on Charlie Rose in New York. And
what year was this? It had to have been at least many years after the dumping.
Yes, and I saw him and Jerry Garcia on Charlie Rose
together.
Yeah,
another sexist creep.
Sexist creep.
Although I did like the Charlie Rose show, especially the way that it was filmed in a black box, and he had a lot of great guests. He was just
another sexist creep.
Age of men. That age of men. In a sense, you got to say it's not that they didn't know any better. They really didn't because they were allowed to get away with that behavior. And the thing is, it was actually just normal for guys that age, for Hunter S. Thompson to be sexist, for all of the all men of that generation. They weren't really made consciously aware of their vulgar inaccuracies about how to treat.
Well, here's what I liked about Ken.
Women and other races.
Here it comes.
He was like a transcendental thing, like to use the vernacular of the 60s, transcendental.
Right.
Charlie Rose said, you and Tim Leary, now that drugs has corrupted everything and it's been so horrible. What do you...
An alcoholic, Charlie Rose says this.
Yeah, and what do you think of Nancy Reagan's saying, just say no? And do you think Just Say No is a good campaign?
And what did he say?
And Jerry and him said, well, we don't know. We just always said thanks.
You were talking about Timothy Leary. There's a weird connection. I don't really have a connection to Timothy Leary, except for some reason, on his deathbed, he asked to see me. He asked Robert Williams if he could meet me. Of course, I wasn't going to go out to his deathbed. And the only other connection I had was photographing Winona Ryder on Aja Argento's The Heart is Deceitful Above All Things, who told me how much Timothy Leary, her godfather, was into me. And I'm like, again, where are these bizarre fans what do they like and why do they never contact me? Since he died,
you have to come back. You have to
since he died, I had a
ghost.
bit of contact with Timothy Leary. But I mean, anyway, we just
I think I have
said
too.
thanks. All right, 73 San Francisco. So what's going on there?
Ziggy Stardust was going on there, and like Grace Jones, I Need a Man.
What were you doing?
I was trying to get away from the hippie macrame, Doobie Brothers.
But you're in San Francisco, so that's not necessarily the place to get away from all that.
Well, yeah,
there's
it was.
also there was a definite
place.
underbelly in spite of the Haight-Ashbury bullshit.
Because that's when the Coquettes and the Tubes and everything were
right,
happening,
right.
and which were all friends of mine. And
The
so,
Tubes, all right.
yeah, and so.
It all leads back to the Tubes.
But anyway, yes.
You go from like the transcendental hippie scene of master literature writers to then the early drag, but bizarre drag, like Coquettes, who did, extreme performances, and the Tubes, which were also, in a sense, some form of musical drag. So you get into that scene.
I really didn't get into that scene so much. They were just friends, and I just
come on, you're on the scene. They're friends.
It was a really good scene, but then I wanted to go to New York because I didn't really like what was going on in San Francisco. It was like Steely Dan, Doobie Brothers.
Well, Doobie Brothers was New York, but they kind of became the same thing eventually.
The period.
No, because
they did. Violet McDonald joined.
There was a lot of good things going on in New York at that time.
Oh, definitely.
So anyway, how did you get to New York?
Well,
were you shaking your booty?
I just left. I just came and I.
Well, you didn't hitchhike. You've always had ways of getting around.
I just got there in like a 1970 Plymouth with a girlfriend, and we just came into CBGBs, which is where I met this thing.
So when you
let her go into the story, this is where she met me. She just pulls up with a Plymouth with a girlfriend outside of CBGBs and walks in. And
I met Lydia, and
I met you.
Yes, okay, she met me.
I went up to her.
I
wonder why.
What year is this?
1977, around December, October, sometime.
She remembers it better than I do. She'll tell it.
It was at the end of 1977.
Who was playing, do you know?
You.
All right, tell the story.
Yeah.
She walks into CBGBs. I'm already in there.
She's sitting at the bar. She's really baby-faced, plump, sexy girl. I go up there, and she's like, we start talking and everything, and she goes, hey, yeah, first pair of decent thighs to walk into this joint. I was like, that was my first time
I know a
ever
good pickup line. I know how to pick up chicks.
Yeah. So she said that, and then she said, hey, do you want to go get something later to eat? And I'm like, okay. When? And she goes, in about 45 minutes. Then she went up, and then she played with Teenage Jesus.
Okay.
And then she came down, and that's...
And I was hungry. 10 minutes in can make me maybe hungry.
It was like,
Do you remember where you ate?
Yes, we had like a salad at Phoebe's. Phoebe's is on the corner where CBG.
Look, let me tell you a little story about Phoebe's. One of my worst experiences there was seeing a homeless man walk with his pants down, shitting on the sidewalk at Phoebe's.
God.
Anyway.
Did that help your appetite or?
No.
Tim Dahl, only in your mind.
All right.
So anyway, now you're on the New York no wave pop new wave scene. Because really, you burst in the door. We meet each other instantly, and what then?
Then, I just felt very comfortable with meeting everyone, it was a really wholesome experience, actually.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, it was really
I'm sure
wholesome.
your hull was really well involved.
Yeah, it was really wholesome.
Well,
Yeah.
now we're
Hey,
talking.
don't rock the table, because I know you rock the boat. So then who were your first friends? So, all right, we meet, but whatever.
Well, my first friends were like all the Zone brothers from Fast and
All right.
Ozone and Mumps and James Chance.
Well,
and
because let's
Contortions
just describe what you looked like when you walked into CBGB's that fateful day. Because
I want to know.
Let's admit, I was probably one of the only people who had any style on that scene because there were a lot of pre-grunge grungers. The only other woman on the scene that had style, in my opinion, was Toots, which was Willie DeVille's girlfriend.
Yes.
With the Beehive. And you kind of had a style similar to Toots. There was me, Anya Phillips, Roxy,
You got a
Johnny
beehive.
Ramone's girlfriend. Vicky always had a more 50s, 60s style. So what are you walking wearing? She remembers what she was wearing.
Yeah, I was wearing like a bumblebee outfit, like black and white stripes with gold, you know,
Go-go
with like
boots?
go-go boots.
Always with
and-
the go-go boots.
All right.
Beehive,
Yeah,
did you have a beehive? What'd you have?
I had a beehive, yeah.
She had a beehive. You would have thought she was in the B-52s, but they didn't
Yeah,
play
but
there.
the B-52s cheated.
How do they cheat?
They cheated because they had wigs.
Wigger, please.
They fucking had wigs. I was like, you know, I would wake up with like split ends on my pillow.
So you're coming in looking a bit like a drag queen yourself. So
I was an idol of the drag queens. As a matter of fact, when the drag queens would perform at that time, like when Angel Jack and Hibiscus and all these guys would come out, they would be like, they came out and they were like Vicky clone. You know, it was, I did inspire a few drag queens
in your day.
Oh, cool.
in my day, yeah.
So, but he immediately gravitated towards, you know, this power pop scene, which was the Fast, which was the Mumps, which was, who else? Paul Zone, who at the time, I mean, the Fast, you know, he was he looked like a skinny version of T-Rex. They played power pop, would often open for Blondie, which, you know, at the time we would call Blondie, you know, Lollipop, because, I mean, that head was just incredible.
Yeah, that head was
And also
very
the
big.
band was so fucking atrocious. But, you know, a little detail about Chris Stein. I have to say, when I warmed up to Chris Stein, I was in Max's one time, and Chris Stein came up and he goes, Lydia, what? Because we just thought Blondie was a joke. They were so bad. And he goes, I really like Teenage Jesus. I'm like, so? But he goes, no, I really like him. And I go, you know what? You're fucking cool.
Yeah.
And I have to
but
say,
didn't you go to the weight the wrestlers?
I
thing
used
with
to go to
them?
wrestling with Debbie and Chris, whatever. But I'm just saying, he was so cool because most other people were terrified of my loud and snotty attitude.
So he handled it well.
And that's, I mean, yes.
And you're
So,
friends.
and we were friends, we were immediate friends because he said, yeah, I really liked you. Yeah, so Paul Zone, let me go back to him. He would do Debbie Harry's hair. He created my costume for Queen of Siam. Some years later, he was a fashion stylist, hairdresser to the stars. He had 3 brothers, gay, from Brooklyn or Queens.
Brooklyn,
Coney
Church
Island.
Street.
And,
Church Street's not Coney
and the
Island.
Fast was a power pop band, and you were very into that scene.
Yeah, I was really into that scene. It was very comfortable for me because it was like about monsters, comic books, very comfortable. They were really like Mandy from Ozone, who
Which, by the way, let me just talk about Ozone for a second because Weasel Walter has recently released a record by Ozone, which was one of the Fast Brothers, kind of power glam pop punkish records, which when I first started hearing this, I thought it was all like, it all sounded like cover songs because they were so catchy, but it was Ozone, which is recently out, and it's one of the Fast Brothers.
Solid stuff.
You know, the New York Dolls, stop rocking the table.
I
The New
am.
York Dolls opened the pathway for a
Oi.
lot of, for more style and fashion, kind of opened the door for like the Fast to come through.
good.
And then you hooked up, you and Lance Loud, who was in the Mumps, and who was also, actually Lance Loud had, and his family with Pat Loud had the first reality TV
yes,
show.
he was the first reality TV star.
And that was
That's
in the
for
like
sure.
70s. And
Yeah.
Pat Loud was part, I mean, it was kind of part of the Warhol scene.
Lance is in the museum. We both are in Philadelphia with the Andy Warhol Museum because Lance wrote all these fan letters to Andy Warhol. Then, when the Loud family became like the first cinema verite family ever, then Andy said, "Why don't you come to New York?" And then they went to the Chelsea.
Well, and
Andy
also,
set him up.
let's just say what the Loud Family TV show was about, because it was really about somebody coming out as gay on TV, which was really controversial at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
I mean, it was really very groundbreaking television.
Yeah, it was really groundbreaking.
And Lance
television.
Loud had such an incredible sense of humor. He was so quick, so fast, so cute, great sense of style.
But he was never coming out because he was gay. He was just coming out because that's who he was. And like everybody should just come out who he was. He always hated when like the New York Times would come to him and say, "What do you think the gays would think?" He's like, "Am I like?"
Well,
the
first
gays?
of all, I mean,
I'm
the
just
gays, as if it's all one cult.
Yes, it's like, and he always really did
gays.
hate that.
But the thing about New York in that period is that there was, I mean, actually, there were so many queer, gay, bi, trans, drag, non-whatever. I mean, people were really, because of post-73, people were really allowed to go and do whatever they wanted and be who they were and be outlandish. I mean, I do thank glam for opening the door to that.
And do we need to say that, Jane County did break Dick Manitoba's collarbone?
So you're in New York in that period. What the hell is going on? What are you doing? I mean, I'm talking late 70s. You're hanging out like the rest of us. You're going out almost every night, having a good time.
Well, it was so cheap to live there.
Well, and what's interesting is you lived in the same building that Connie of Mars, and at that time it was either Arto Lindsay or Mark Cunningham lived in. The Swopes, who were in Beirut Slump, lived in. You were living there, and of course, Connie Berg still lives there. I mean, it was in Chelsea. Everyone else was on the Lower East Side, or below. That was kind of a hot spot building too.
Yeah, that was a really good building, and we just it was very cheap to live in New York then, and that time will never be again. Who can ever afford to come here again,
Well, don't come here. All I'm saying is don't bother to come to fucking New York. Go someplace else anyway.
Yeah, go someplace else.
What was, okay, give us a scenario. I mean, you're on the scene. You're out a lot. We're all out a lot.
Yeah, we're all out not a lot. We're all out every night.
Every night.
We're out every
and mainly
fucking
because
night.
either some of us had such shitty apartments, or what else is there to do? Nobody was watching TV. Nobody had internet. Nobody had cell phones.
And it was so cheap.
Excuse me, cheap. We never paid to get into anywhere. That's what I can't figure out. Nobody I know can figure out how we all got into clubs for free, never paying to get in anywhere. Some of us underage.
Work your magic, and we can still.
Well,
do that
they wanted the chicken bait.
We went out every single night.
So you're going out every night. You're connecting with all these people. There's a community forming that you're part of. How do you use it to your advantage? What did you start doing? That you have a career basically by just knowing everyone.
We didn't think anything about career.
No, she doesn't know.
We didn't go to the gym. We didn't think about career.
She's never had a career. She has penetrated many different circles and many different echelons of various cultural significance.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's jump here because, first of all, after the Ken Kesey, after the glam, after the pop punk of New York, post no wave, then really your musical interests start to change.
Yeah, then I went into the whole hip hop thing, and I AD'd a lot of music videos,
like
early Def Jam, Christmas in Hollis,
Funny.
like Run DMC and LL Cool J and OJ and Willie. And,
Willie?
Oh, well,
I don't know Willie. Willie who? All I know is Willie DeVille. I don't know any Willies.
No, not Willie DeVille.
How did you get into that
But the thing
scene?
with the hip-hop thing, here's the thing with the hip-hop thing, is that it completely changed my whole idea of what a rebellious nature was about. Because before that, it was like the rebels were outside in the parking lot. Hip-hop made it like, you're not out in the fucking parking lot. You're not outside. You're not on the periphery. We're going in.
In what sense?
Well, that it was
in a club?
They didn't think it was almost like a hippie concept to be a rebel, to be on the outside of things. We want to be inside.
What do you mean by that, by inside?
Inside means like we want to make money, we want to have nice things, we want to be famous.
Okay. We want to make music that's catchy.
But was that Russell Simmons and Rick Rubin?
But look, look, in general, hip-hop or rap music, I mean, the beats, the music is something that is catchy, contagious, that's groovy. Unlike, for instance, no wave, or, I mean, it is something that is kind of, if you like that style, inclusive. And also because it is trying to speak to a generation and to a mindset or to an economic set that hasn't really been spoken to before.
Yeah,
so that's
and you
understandable.
didn't have to be on the outside anymore. That's what I liked about it. It was the first time ever, because my whole life I had been counterculture. This time I saw counterculture isn't all it's cracked up to be.
But rap and hip hop was initially counterculture.
It was counterculture, but the goal was to get out of it.
To get above
to get
it.
money.
But wasn't the goal of things like Def Jam, the business end was the goal? I mean, the early rappers were, I mean, I guess they like the money and having fun and having nice things. But
they were willing to take all the chances, though, because it wasn't easy going down to the yards, and spray painting and getting all the notoriety and doing all the graffiti
Well, I mean,
stuff.
and look, were the musicians doing that? Some, not all. But anyway, you know how hip-hop really, in my opinion, started was with the Blackout of 77, when there was so much looting for electronics. And then a lot of people could actually...
Yeah,
I
turntable.
love the looting in 77 during the Blackout. That is is really what gave hip hop a big push forward, because people that couldn't afford anything suddenly broke a fucking window and now have their turntables. Should be done again.
Well, retail's gone, so you'd have to
Yeah, I know. What are you going to break into Amazon?
A warehouse.
What are you going to break into Amazon?
Exactly.
Hey, listen, like being part of something, it was like this outmoded concept of being on the outside. You were on the inside now. Who wants to be on the outside? Who wants to glorify poverty? Who wants to glorify being not having money? Oh, we're losers and everything. No, we want money.
Go to bar college, you might find something out. Right?
No, we want some things, So I did like that. I parted company with the feminist stuff at that time.
Well, what do you mean parted company with what feminist stuff?
Well, because the role of women was very.
When you graduated into the rap community, you left the feminism behind because of the way they treated women.
I didn't leave it behind. I left the hip hop behind because I didn't like. Oh, okay,
there you go. Right. Well, the same reason you left Ken Kesey behind.
Yeah,
because again,
I didn't
sexist
like grunting on all fours. I was like,
oh, honey, you like grunting on all fours,
but not in public and not on a video.
Oh yeah.
So we've covered your San Francisco experience, your Oregon experience. We covered coming to New York and hip hop. What comes next?
The whole BC studio, Martin.
That would be Martin Bisi studio.
Yes, and what went on there was basically, like an underground studio, didn't have a lot of money. It was put together first. Like Eno needed a lot of time in the studio. And so Martin didn't have a lot of equipment.
So you're talking about Martin Bisi, who you were married to,
Yeah.
and you started this studio called BC Sound,
So
which a lot of people went to record in. So who were some of the first people?
You.
I don't remember it, but I'm sure it was.
Well, you had a few albums, and Sonic Youth, and Swans, and
Bill Laswell
and Rocket, and oh god,
Rocket was done there. Herbie Hancock.
Yeah, Herbie Hancock. Why don't we announce the author
Jim
and not the
and John Zorn, and people like that, So Afrika Bambaata, Futura, all the early graffiti artists, Fab Five Freddy. And it was just a facility.
Well, if you go there now, or you used to actually have a lot of
all
records.
the albums on the wall,
and then a lot of the Japanese avant-garde people.
Yeah.
You know that one of my albums fell on somebody's head when they were in there.
Yes. Yeah, no, it was always a thing there. It was like a real kind of proud thing to be there. And Martin was always really happy to try to do what he could for that. But he started the studio with Bill Laswell. And then they got this idea, like Eno wanted to have a lot of time.
This is when Eno was spending time in New York, I guess.
Yeah, and he was living in Soho. And so Eno said, instead of me spending $20,000 on studio time, let me buy you some equipment,
the gear, right.
And then you can work.
Very good idea.
Yeah, so Eno bought
one of Eno's best.
Yeah, Brian bought a lot of equipment. Here's a funny thing: David Byrne and Eno, they came out in a car service. And somehow they were walking from the studio. This was before Brooklyn was gentrified.
Well, this is what Park Slope was very dangerous in this period, and this was deep Park Slope.
Especially where we were,
kind of Park Slope, Gowanus.
We were in Gowanus,
exactly.
Yeah.
Gowanus.
And so Brian, Eno, and
David Byrne, always. Not the two most masculine men in music.
Yeah, they got mugged, and so Martin and I, we get this phone call that
Did they steal Eno's cap?
And we were like, oh fuck. No one is ever going to want to come to the studio now. It's bad enough because we couldn't afford to have a studio in New York. Bad enough. And so then when we got there, we were like, oh, well, I guess this is it. Like, no one's ever going to want to come to this studio again, knowing you're going to get mugged. And they said, could you please not tell anyone what happened?
Well, now we know.
Yeah.
Now we're telling everybody.
Now we're telling everybody.
Well,
they were kind of embarrassed that
Look,
they
there
got mugged.
There are other things I told about both of them that I'm sure they never wanted to hear, but that's fine anyway. But you spend a lot of time and you put a lot of energy into that studio.
Yeah, and like
you helped to run it for a long time.
Like Sonny Chirac or Nick Coleman's son, all those guys.
Well, let's talk about Material, for instance, which brought in a lot of these different characters. And
world music and all that. Yeah.
What year was this? What year was this?
1982, 83.
Early on, right. A lot of, experimental world music, mixing genres together.
So talk about Bootsy Collins, because he's hanging around too.
I was upstairs, and they were all down there, Laswell and Michael Beanhorn and all Fred Marr and all these people. They're all down there. I mean, like hearing all this fucking buzzing. I go down there. It's like the FedEx people. They go, yeah, we're here to pick up from Bootsy Collins. And we're like, what? And then like Bootsy has all these super tacky heart Valentine, those things with chocolate. And he said, yeah, I got to send these to all my girls. And so, yeah, Bootsy Collins.
From Cincinnati, I guess that's where he lives.
Yeah. Well, I don't know where exactly he lives
All
now.
right, but eventually, I mean, you had to get out of that scene because it becomes oppressive and you're living kind of in this studio loft. And I mean, you had to move on.
I did move on because, Martin was very understanding of all these bands like Sonic Youth and all these groups like that.
In other words, he was getting underpaid.
He was getting underpaid, and he was thinking he was being
and
he
was being really kind and generous to a scene that could blossom only out of somebody's generosity.
Yeah, he was really good about that. And
I mean, he should have milked and bilked Eno for more money.
Lee Ronaldo was the nicest guy of the whole scene. Lee always tried, but. It was like...
He's still trying. Lee Ronaldo is still trying.
Like, I would run up the stairs.
Lee is free.
Late, because I never wanted to go back home, which we lived there in the studio.
You don't want to go back home, but which was like, what, one door away from the studio?
No, I didn't want to go back home. We lived all in that studio. It was like $700 for 3 floors on 3rd Street and 3rd Avenue.
Yeah. Life in your hands, but whatever.
I would run in and there would be like Ginger Baker's, all his drums. Or Lee Ronaldo has like about 500 guitars.
Well, okay.
Well, 100, okay.
When you don't really know how to play one, you might need 400 to make up for it. I don't know. I'm just saying. I only had one guitar and no effects, but that's just me. I'm a minimalist.
And all these people.
So did you meet Ginger Baker? I mean, he's kind of a polarizing character. I mean,
no. Ginger Baker is a good guy. Yeah.
Interesting. Not everyone says that, but okay.
Yeah. Well,
Well, Vicky brings out the beast in most people's. I mean, the best. So I mean, she's very accommodating to musicians.
Yeah. So Lydia and I have had this friendship for all these years, and I'm still writing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And Victoria Galves is a really brilliant pop satirist, a culture vulture who can then spit out actually the essence of a scene into something, a scene in time, and make it really hilarious and really get to the essence of it, because she kind of just radars in to the point of these very diverse elements, different diverse periods in time.
Yeah, well, it's like the kind of like anti-Forrest Gump, like
You're anti-Forrest Gump. I'm too, I guess.
No, it's because like instead of like good things happening, like, ooh, he met President Kennedy. No, instead you did something else horrible. So it's that same time period, except all the things are bad. You
did? I'm not trying to follow this.
Yeah.
But that look, whatever she writes about, it's never negative. It's always hilarious. So anyway, we came together and actually we worked on 2 scripts together. We worked on my screenplay Psycho Menstruum, which Robert Williams gave me the title of, which we wrote it, but I mean it was going to go nowhere. I mean we sent it to Cronenberg, we sent it to whoever,
and even Debbie Harry was doctor.
Look, I mean it was a bit far ahead of its time. Maybe it was about a doctor wanting to find a cure for the monthly monster and other female cancers, who starts experimenting on herself and then becoming, because she's using estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, becoming like a man, fucking and killing.
How many crime stories have you heard in Dateline of like people on steroids going crazy, killing people?
Roid rages, yeah.
Exactly.
Anyway,
don't underestimate hormones.
The script still existed, and who knows? One day it may be resurrected. But then I called her in to help me write a screenplay on somebody we both knew intimately, who eventually ended up committing murder-suicide on his way to see me right after Retrovirus had begun.
I heard about this. That was before I was in the band.
And, I mean, Vicky was on the scene at the same time. It's called 511 East 12th Street. It will be into production soon. But, I mean, her memory about the times, and also the fact that she actually picked up with the maniac that I ran away from.
Right.
In order
and I
to
asked her about that. I said, hey, is this breaking girl code? She goes, no, don't let talent like that go to waste.
Don't let a talent like that go to waste.
Don't let
We didn't realize well, look, I mean, we didn't realize that he eventually would, not long after that, hitchhike to Florida with a boa constrictor around his neck, rob a few banks, and get away with it.
He sent me Valentine cards that were like
The speeding tickets.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. So well, this guy was a real charmer, clearly.
Hey, look, he's the last of a kind because they don't make men like that anymore because
they
every movement he made was moviola. I mean, he was like Marlon Brando, James Dean. I mean, every action he did.
It was elevated to a sense of cool.
So where is he now?
He's dead.
Excuse me.
He died.
Committed murder,
that guy.
suicide on his way to see
He
me.
was an iron worker.
I can't keep them all. I can't keep them all.
Yeah. Well, one's in prison, one's in the insane asylum, whatever, you know.
Exactly. I can't keep track
Look,
here. I mean, there's a lot
the
of
thing, what's interesting, I'm not going into that whole story. When I do my Valentine special, I'm going to go into My Lover the Killer, which is also a part of this whole story. But anyway, I called Vicky in, and it was under the auspice of Chris Hanley, who, Muse Productions, who's produced American Psycho, Virgin Suicides, The Killer Inside Me, Spring Breakers, etc., who told me 7 years ago, write my screenplay. So we started writing it. We wrote it. We sent it to him. He never read it. I sent it to him again when he's in Cannes Film Festival with James Franco, not reading it. I sent it to fucking again when Vinyl comes out, and they're like, where's Lydia's doc? And finally, when that would be me, Tim Dahl, and I think it was Walter and Simon Slater, were in Joshua Tree, I had to basically almost Reservoir Dog Chris Hanley, and it wasn't even him who told me to write the screenplay, but his producing partner that is interested in this. And what we're working on now, so now she's back in my manifold, and what we're working on now is
manifold.
I mean, the only comment from the would-be producer is, we need a little tenderness. Now, you can only imagine what that means to me. So, Vicky and I are now back finishing up this script, which may or may not ever be produced. Maybe we'll just publish it as a book. But it is the true story, which begins in 1977, the Blackout in New York, concerning a lover of mine who, right when Retrovirus started, and I wanted to see him after not seeing him for more than 30 years, committed murder-suicide on the way to see me. And I happened to be at the sister's house of the man that rescued me from him originally back in the day, Nation.
Marty Nation.
We podcast, one of those popular podcasts. And Victoria actually picked up the slops after me. So we're trying to complete the story of this, actually the last of a kind of a very romantic type maniac. And as we always like to say, we like our maniacs to act like maniacs.
Yeah. We like her. If you're going to look like a maniac,
Yeah,
you
better
act
like a maniac. Well, and the thing is, the whole point of the screenplay anyway is something we both intimately understand, which is, damaged people get involved with damaged people because they see, or they want to see, the beautiful child that's inside both of them before the initial trauma and battery began. And that's basically what the screenplay is. So all of this nightmare horror, more damage upon damage.
You're a rookie if you think that it's just like all about the horror. You're just
What
protecting.
I guess I'm a rookie. I think it's only about the horror. You got me. You got me. You called me out.
You're protecting yourself.
Nobody
That's
said
all.
anything about that. What are you talking about?
I'm rolling with her.
Hey,
It's
listen.
a little sparring. It's okay.
You know what?
What's
The
up?
horror.
You're just
The
trying to
hooah.
protect. You're just trying to protect yourself.
Well, duh.
You know nothing about
Is
Tim.
that a
Excuse me,
threat?
you know nothing about Tim Dahl. Don't speak on his account. I'll tell you something later. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
I'm not.
The point of the story is
don't know
this.
where this is
Excuse
going.
me. I do. The point of the story is this, that we have already accomplished and that may or may not be produced, but I think it's a story that needs to be told, like all the stories I tell, which is when people have had incredible trauma, there is a magnetism, there is victimology, they will find each other. I mean, at first it's glorious, true love blossoms. They may then go back to repetitive patterns, which they have not yet got over, but in spite of that, because their demons connect, they always want to go back to that 1 minute. And they can see it in each other. They
That's
just
a
don't know
fucking
how to get
junkie
there.
thing. That's
they
a
just
junkie thing.
don't
Like, I want
know
that.
how to get there to that 1 minute before trauma.
Right. Well, that's like a junkie thing.
Nice analysis,
That's what
yes.
junkies always
No,
want.
junkies don't want to get back to that one moment, but I guess they do.
They
Yeah,
do.
You're right. Well,
they
this
do.
is-
They want to get back to that one high. It's going to be better. Like fucking hope is a joke.
Hope is a motherfucking joke.
Hope
oh my
is
God.
a joke.
Well,
Hope is the cruelest form of bondage.
This has been the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Victoria Galves. Thank you very much. You're listening to the Lydia and Spin, but then again, I think you knew that. We've provided at the bottom of this episode a link. We're taking a survey. Now, I love numbers and statistics. I'm not sure I'm a fan of surveys, but we actually need your help. And I would say trying to serve you better. You really believe that? Actually, we're trying to get some sponsors up so that we can provide you with this fantastic program every Friday for the foreseeable future, which is how long this pandemic is going to last. So if you wouldn't mind just taking 3 minutes of your time, what else are you doing today? And filling out the questionnaire, link at the bottom of this page. If you're listening on other platforms, you can simply go to the lydianspin.net and it'll be at the bottom of the latest episode. As an incentive, one of you will definitely receive a little gift from me. Can't promise what that is now, but I'm sure I'll dig something up. I've got plenty of time to clean up my closets. Thank you for listening to the Lydia and Spin.